Now that we're getting comfortable with how to interpret the empirical rule, we're going to find the percent of data values that fall within a certain range of values. Going back to our example where the mean number of text sent by one individual in a day is 83 with that standard deviation of 9 text. If this is the case, we want to know approximately, because truth is the empirical rule is only giving us an approximation. It's a pretty good approximation, but it is just an approximation. Approximately what percent of days send between 83 and 101 text messages? Well, let's start by drawing a picture here. Here's our days, with 83 being the mean. We want to be between 83 and 101 text messages. So I'm going off to the right here. If I were to add one standard deviation to 83, we would get 92. And if I would add another standard deviation, we get to that 101 text. That 101 text is 2 standard deviations above the mean. So I want to be in this green section between the mean and 2 standard deviations of the mean. Well, we also know that if I go back to -2 standard deviations from the mean, the space between -2 and +2 standard deviations of the mean, 2 standard deviations represents 95% of the data values. But we only want the right side, which is 1/2 of that 95%. So if I take that 95% and cut it in half, what we find is 47.5% of days are sending between 83 and 101 text messages. Let's try a second example where we do that. For the second example, we want to know the percent of days that we send between 74 and 110 text messages. So again, we'll draw a picture. 83 is right in the middle. We want to go to the right up to 110, counting in standard deviations. With the standard deviation of 9, we add 9. 1 standard deviation is 92. Adding 9, 2 standard deviations is 101. Adding 9, 3 standard deviations is 110. 110 was 3 standard deviations above the mean to get that 110 text. Going to the left then, down to the 74, 1 standard deviation below the mean, subtracting 9 gives us 74. And that is exactly that 1 standard deviation below the mean. So we want to know how much percent is falling inside these ranges. Well, we know that 1 standard deviation range is 68% of our data values. If I just want the one side, that would be half of 68. Half of 68 would be 34%. So from the mean down, that's 34%. On the other side, we see it going out to 3 standard deviations. And we know from 3 standard deviations below the mean to 3 standard deviations above the mean, we see 99.7% of the data values. And the right side of that then is just going to be half of that 99.7%. Well, half of 99.7% is 49.85%. And so if we combine that together, the 34% and the 49.85%, combine those together, we end up with 83.85% of days are sending between 74 and 110 text messages. That's how the empirical rule can help us visualize where our values are falling and what percent of our values fall within a certain range that we might be interested in.